you saw the first video I did on the Corrado and were very astute, you may have noticed that in the window up here, there was a red light reflecting in the window. And back in the day, we called them idiot lights because you'd be an idiot if you drove with the light on. It turned out to be the brake light, and I did about an hour and a half of driving without noticing it myself. Somewhere along the line I did. It was low on fluid, and I filled it back up again. The fluid lasted about maybe a week, and then the light came back on, so I had to do some serious investigating. I traced the brake fluid leak to the ABS unit based on where it was dripping from. It was coming out of a plastic cover over what turned out to be the electronic differential lock, or the EDL. This system is a TEVS 20 ABS system. If I'm pronouncing that right, I'm not sure. It's unfortunately very rare. I can't find a lot of information on it. I wasn't able to come up with anything that was even close to getting it repaired. Nobody rebuilds them as far as I could find. There was supposed to be somebody in Atlanta area, Georgia area, but I couldn't find any information on them. It looked like that company went out of business as far as I could tell. Maybe someone in the comments could let me know if they did. Based on the Bentley manual, that unit shouldn't be disassembled anyway. When I decided to switch this over to non-anti-lock brakes, since there was no way to repair this one in my research, I did actually take it apart, and there is a very thin gasket that was sandwiched in between that and the ABS unit. I don't think anyone maybe could repair the gasket, but then there's no information on reassembly on the unit. So that was the final decision to go with non-anti-lock brakes. While I was gathering all the parts to complete the anti-lock brake to non-anti-lock brake conversion, I had to move the car and found a significant fuel leak and had to investigate that. I actually knew nothing about the anti-lock brake to non-anti-lock brake conversion for the Corrado, so I had to do a lot of research to find out what parts I needed. First big part was the bracket to hold the booster and the slave cylinder on for the clutch onto the firewall that I sourced from S&P. There were models listed for master cylinder and the booster that were for non-anti-lock for Volkswagens, so I purchased a couple of those parts. Once I got enough of the parts, I started doing the work. It took several months basically for me to do it. The first step was to disconnect the battery, pull out the old components underneath the dash. There were a couple of panels that had to come out, about 4 screws on the side, a couple on the one that goes between the clutch and brake pedal. Once those came out, and then I was able to remove the knee pad. After I got the knee pad out, I had to take out the clip holding the brake push rod to the pedal, the brake pedal itself, and then I had to take the 3 bolts out for the anti-lock braking system through the firewall. They are underneath the dashboard behind the brake pedal on the firewall, and they were pretty hard to film. I couldn't really film it very easily, and the sockets, I had to use several different size sockets and different extensions. The master cylinder had a couple of nuts in the engine bay that I had to take out. That was a little bit of a fight with the small amount of space. Then I had to move on to the brake lines. I tucked the rag underneath the brake lines to catch any brake fluid drips. Anti-lock brake system and all the components took some finagling to get out. brake system components were removed, I started test fitting all of the new parts. I test fitted the S&P bracket to the brake booster along with the brake master cylinder. After I test fitted the master cylinder, I put the clutch master cylinder on there just to make sure everything fit and see which parts I had to include when I finished it. Inside the brake booster, there's an adjustable shaft that has to come in contact with the back of the master cylinder to transfer the pressure into the brake lines. I used a cheap China freight caliper to measure the length of the back of the master cylinder barrel and the adjustable brake booster shaft. I had to buy a flexible head ratcheting box wrench just to be able to get in to tighten the, I think it was an 8mm locking nut. And before I finalized it, I put a bunch of Loctite on there and cranked it down as tight as I could in that tight spot. I double checked the length of the brake pedal push rod against the old unit. Luckily that was correct. Before I installed the brake components, I noticed the clutch pressure line. The slave cylinder was dry rotted and cracking badly. Since that part is no longer available, I had to have a local hydraulic shop build me a new one. They were able to use the fittings from the original pressure line. It was around $70 US dollars to have it made. Once rebuilt, install was easy. The first brake line flaring tool I tried didn't make the right kind of bubble flare for the fittings that were from the original car, so I switched over to a multiple size brake line adjusting clamping unit. That was a little cumbersome working on the lines in the engine bay, but I was able to get it done. I found it easiest to feed the new brake lines down through the engine bay to the back of the car. That was the easiest way to do it. Make sure you put the fittings on the brake line before you do the bubble flares, because there's no way to get it on there otherwise. I was able to use the original brake line clamps going up to the front of the vehicle, so that made it a lot easier. I still need to clean up the angles and bends on the brake lines in front and back, but I'll have to do that once I finalize this project. Once I had the bubble flares cleaned up and ready to go, I was able to tighten everything into the proportioning blocks in the back of the car. I didn't tighten any of or install any of the bolts inside the footwell just to make sure that I could get the brake lines set up prior to attaching anything to the car. At that point I was able to screw in the brake line fittings, and then I was able to install the footwell ducts and tighten everything down.
Once I had all the brake lines fitted and tightened, I was able to get ready for filling the master cylinder reservoir with brake fluid. Many years ago I bought a power brake bleeder from Motive, so I dug that out of the back of the cupboards. Unfortunately it didn't go well. The Motive fluid tube broke and dumped brake fluid all over the engine bay. It was quite a mess to clean up. I didn't record any of that brake fluid cleanup since I was worried about the paint getting damaged in the engine bay. Brake fluid can peel paint off just like a paint stripper. Once the reservoir was full, I did break each caliper's bleeder valve with a bottle of fluid on it. After I had all the brake lines and calipers bled, I replaced the cooling overflow tank and any of the other parts that I had removed to get the anti-lock braking system out. I spliced in a temporary vacuum line for the brake booster. Pulled the fuse related to the anti-lock braking components. The entire wiring system needs to be redone in the car, so that'll have to wait for later, but I didn't clean anything up at this time. Once I thought I had the brakes bled properly, I dropped the car down and drove to the end of my driveway. I wasn't happy with the brake pedal pressure, so I was able to recruit my brother to come over and bleed the brakes manually. A couple days later, I was able to get it up on the quick jacks, which made life easier to do all four corners all at once. So we filled the reservoir, had my brother get in the car and pump the brakes, then crack each valve. Quite a bit of air came out of the brake lines and calipers, doing it the old-fashioned way, so I'm glad I did it that way. Once we had a firm brake pedal and everything was cleaned up, I double-checked to make sure there was no leaks. After that, it was time to put the wheels back on and drop it off the jacks and torque down the lug nuts, getting ready for the first test drive. Since a lot of European cars have wheel bolts instead of studs and lug nuts, I bought a threaded rod to be a guide on the installation of the wheels. Put the threaded rod in one of the bolt holes and slide the wheel over that. Then it gives you an opportunity to put a couple of wheel bolts in without having to hold the wheel against the hub. Well, that's going to do it for this video. The next one will be about the Corrado and some new problems that crept up. Thanks for watching.